Turning Tides is the next DLC for Battlefield 1 due out this December. Even though there's still a few months away, I was allowed to play and capture an extremely early build of 2 of the new maps in the CTE. First off, let me say that as you probably noticed, the maps have no textures and not much detail. When I said they were at an early stage, I meant it, and this is a standard process in games design. Textures and detail will come later, but it's pretty interesting to see the maps in this early stage. I think the last time that this happened was with the community map project back in Battlefield 4. So here you can get a feel for what the maps are going to play like, but they won't come to life until the textures and detail are added. So the 2 maps I got to play were Cape Hell and Achibarbar. Cape Hell sits at the base of the Gallipoli Peninsula, and it was a beach assault because of the slightly different version of Conquest we were playing called Conquest Assault. Now if you're a Battlefield veteran, you'll probably remember Conquest Assault from BF2 and also BF3. The defending team starts with all of the flags already captured, and the attacking team have to land on the beach and take them out. They also start with 250 tickets. If the attacking team captures all points at once, then the only place that any dead defending team players can spawn on is on teammates because they've got no headquarters. I'm pretty interested to try this mode out a bit with more players and a full 64 player server to see how it goes. The second map was called Achibarbar, and it was an infantry only map, no vehicles on this one at all. It's got a cool layout though, with wide choke points and large rocks and cliffs for cover. When I played this one though, it wasn't quite a full server again, so I'd like to experience it with full 64 players to see if any of the choke points get a bit much, but overall I enjoyed it. Both maps are at a very early stage right now, so later in development we can get a better feel for them. As well as the maps though, I also got to play with new weapons coming to the DLC, and these are quite exciting. Assault gets the M12P16, which is a machine pistol. The first one in history, in fact. This thing is, well, it's a bit mad. It's got an incredibly fast rate of fire. The Automatico's got a new rival in town, let me tell you. But the downside is that it doesn't have much ammo in the magazine, it doesn't have much range, and it takes quite a while to reload. If you're good, you can take out a few enemies with well-placed bursts, but you'd better hope that you've got plenty of time to reload before you encounter someone else. I had a lot of fun with this thing in close range. It just absolutely tears people up. The second new assault weapon is the C96 Trench. You'll recognise this weapon from the pilot class, but it's actually not that bad in its assault form. It's pretty fast firing and you could take out a few enemies relatively easy at close range. And it's something to remember about both of these new assault weapons actually. They're very, very close range weapons. In truth, most of the assault weapons are pretty close range anyway, but these 2 especially in particular. There was also a new gadget available for the Assault class, a flak rocket gun that seems to be designed to work on air vehicles. Now this thing is incredibly easy to use and get kills on planes with. I reckon that the damage is going to be nerfed before it makes it to the final version of the game, but it's an anti-plane option for infantry, and that's been a big request of the community for quite some time now, and finally the Assault class has that. So it works like this. You fire at the target and the projectile will go off near the plane if it's near enough and do a sort of AoE flak damage like an AA gun would. This means that you've got a little more leeway with your accuracy when trying to hit a plane with a rocket gun, and it makes infantry more viable against planes. It's also a decision you'll have to make as to which rocket gun to take. Do you want the normal one or the flak one? Because I didn't get to properly test this, but I would guess that the flak version is much weaker against armour like tanks and cars. So then you've got to choose really, do you want to be an assault player who's stronger against land or air? And of course that's very map dependent though. Next up we've got the medic weapon called the Farquhar Hill. I'm pretty sure that Farquhar was the bad guy in Shrek, but we'll leave that one on the cutting floor. So this one's got 2 versions, one for range with an optical sight, and the other version comes without the sight but with more stability. Now I quite like this gun. Its rate of fire is pretty slow, but you've got a lot of ammo to play with, 20 bullets in the magazine to be specific, but be wary of the long reload time here. It's got an interesting drum mag though, so it's a pretty interesting looking weapon with a cool reload. The sound as well is pretty neat. Now moving on to support, we get an iconic and awesome looking weapon. the Browning M1917. It also comes with a telescopic version if that's your taste, but this thing just looks absolutely fantastic. Normally you would see the Browning as a tripod based weapon for the US military, and if you look at the size of this thing you can see why. But this one, however, is of course a handheld version, and while it fires relatively slowly, it's got 250 bullets in the magazine and it takes a very long time to overheat. In fact, when I tested it, I fired off around 100 bullets before it overheated, so I imagine that if you've got a couple of these in a squad, it's going to be very good at trying to take down planes. And then lastly, we've got the Scout class, which has two new weapons, the Arasaka and the Carcano. The Arasaka is a Japanese rifle, and this one is a very close range gun. Its designed range seems to be around 25 to 50 meters, and I really enjoyed using this one up close, whereas the Carcano perhaps not so much. It's got a much longer time between shots, and it didn't seem quite as good, but given a bit more time I would like to play around with them more. The Carcano is an Italian rifle. I think overall we've got some very interesting weapons here in the DLC. The assault weapons are going to be used a lot on infantry maps, and I can feel that already, and the Browning is just such an iconic gun and needs no explanation. No sign of that grappling hook gadget though, but perhaps a load of gadgets just haven't been added as this is such an early build of the DLC. And here we've got a look at the new spawning system. I don't think this system is actually in the vanilla game yet. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It may be already in there, but I think it's only in CTE. And basically what happens here is if I spawn in on a teammate that dies during the transition from me clicking deploy, instead of putting me in the game like it usually does, it will actually drag me back to the spawn menu. Now what's the purpose of this? Well, I'm sure that if you've played BF1 for any period of time, sometimes you'll notice squad mates spawning on dead squad mates. So you think you've killed the last member of a squad, but then a second later someone will spawn there and you're not prepared for that and they'll kill you. So it seems a bit unfair that that happens. So this new system's in place to try and stop that from occurring. Obviously DICE can't predict if the squad mate is going to die once you've clicked deploy, so this system, it will bring you in and then bring you back out. It may be a bit jarring for some, but I think that I would prefer this system than having people spawning on dead squad mates, because that's just incredibly annoying. Now wrapping up, something else very important to mention here, and I think this is going to please a load of people. You've perhaps noticed this in the footage, the difference in the movement. Lots of things are being tested right now on the CTE in relation to movement, and one of these things is movement speed, specifically how fast you can accelerate from a standstill and how much you can accelerate when trying to move left and right. This is mainly to try and stop what's known as ADAD spam that I'm sure you've come across, where in close range firefights it's really hard to track people sometimes because they're moving from left to right so quickly. But the current version in this build of CTE has slowed down the movement a lot, perhaps a bit too much I think. It's a step in the right direction, but there's a fine balance between slowing it down and having it feel clunky. I believe the idea is that you've got initial speed to say peek a corner, but then afterwards your speed is limited to stop you from abusing it. Alongside that, the slide has seen a huge change. Right now in BF1 the slide is used constantly where you're playing against good players. You can almost instantly slide and slide again, zip-zag back and forward, and it looks like you're moving around like a crazy person, making you really hard to hit. You can even slide backwards. Don't ask me how that works, but in the current build of BF1 it does. A lot of people don't like the slide because they feel like it can be abused. And in the CTE right now, it's had a huge change and a big movement speed decrease after you slide. It pretty much slows you down to almost a complete stop for a few seconds. Combine that with the fact that you can't accelerate fast into another slide in the first place, and you can see a massive difference here in how players are moving around. I think the way they're going with this system means that in an ideal world, you could use the slide to get into cover if you're in a jam, but you can't then abuse it again to dance around opponents. In short, they're tweaking it to how I think it was always intended to be. It's a movement option that's intended to get you into cover, and then once you're in cover, you can stay there and regenerate health, reload, whatever it is you want to do. It's not perfect right now, of course, and they will change it up, I think, and move the values around a bit before it gets introduced into the vanilla game, but I like the way this is heading. So in terms of turning tides, again, this is a really early work in progress look at the DLC, and it's only 2 out of the 4 maps that we're going to get with this DLC. I'm sure there's going to be new vehicles and other surprises that we haven't even seen yet, so I'm really looking forward to checking that out in the final product later this year. So that's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up button down below. That would be great. If you didn't like it, hit the thumbs down. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you in the next one.